Picture this moment. Two guys walk into Blockbuster's headquarters in Dallas with an idea that could save the company billions of dollars. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph, the co-founders of a struggling little DVD rental service called Netflix, are sitting across from Blockbuster's CEO John Antioco. The year is 2000 and Netflix is barely surviving. The pitch is simple. Netflix will handle Blockbuster's online business. Blockbuster will promote Netflix inside their stores. They'll split the profits. And Netflix is asking for just $50 million to make it happen. John Antioco doesn't even finish the meeting. The Netflix founders get laughed out of the room. 20 years later, Netflix is worth over $150 billion. Blockbuster has exactly one store left in the entire world. This is the story of how the king of video rentals became a punchline. How arrogance, late fees, and a complete refusal to see the future destroyed an empire that once had 9,000 stores worldwide. Before we continue into how Blockbuster lost everything, subscribe for real stories about companies that rose fast and fell even faster. Let's go back to 1985. A guy named David Cook opens the first Blockbuster store in Dallas, Texas with a revolutionary idea. Stock more copies of new releases than anyone else. This sounds completely obvious now, but back then, most video rental stores only had 2 or 3 copies of the hot new movie everyone wanted to watch. Blockbuster had 20 copies. Cook didn't stop there. He built a computerized inventory system to track every single tape in every single store. At a time when most video stores were run by one guy who just memorized what was in stock, this was like bringing a supercomputer to a math test. The competition didn't stand a chance. By 1987, there were 19 Blockbuster stores. By 1989, there were 1,000 stores. The growth was absolutely explosive. By 2004, at the absolute peak of the company's power, Blockbuster had 9,094 stores operating in 25 countries around the world. Walk into any American town, and that blue and yellow sign was as common as McDonald's golden arches. Friday night meant one thing for millions of families. You got in the car and drove to Blockbuster. It was a weekly ritual, almost like going to church. But here's the thing about empires. The bigger they get, the harder it becomes to see the cracks forming underneath your feet. Late fees. Those 2 words would eventually destroy the entire company. Blockbuster made $800 million every single year from late fees. That's not a typo. $800 million. Customers absolutely hated late fees, but Blockbuster couldn't afford to let go of that revenue stream. Those penalties represented 16% of their total annual income. Think about that business model. For just a second. You're literally punishing your own customers for enjoying your product too much. You create resentment and frustration with every single transaction. But when those late fees are funding your entire operation, when they're keeping all 9,000 stores open, you become trapped. You can't give them up, even though you know they're destroying customer loyalty. Here's where the story gets really interesting. Meanwhile, back in 1997, Reed Hastings rents a copy of Apollo 13 from his local video store. He returns it 6 weeks late and gets hit with a $40 late fee. He's embarrassed. He's angry. And most importantly, he starts thinking about whether there's a better way to do this whole rental business. That embarrassing moment is how Netflix actually starts, not as some brilliant tech company trying to disrupt the entire entertainment industry. It starts with one guy who hated late fees and figured other people probably hated them too. The Netflix business model is dead simple. $20 per month, unlimited rentals, no late fees whatsoever. You can keep the DVDs as long as you want without any penalty. But in the year 2000, Netflix is bleeding money. They desperately need help. They need capital. They need brand recognition. They need Blockbuster. If you're enjoying the story so far, make sure you're subscribed for more true business collapses like this. So let's go back to that fateful meeting in Dallas. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph fly to Texas and walk into John Antioco's corporate office. They're carrying a proposal that seems perfect for both companies. Blockbuster should buy Netflix for $50 million. Netflix becomes Blockbuster.com. They handle all the online rental business while Blockbuster focuses on what they do best, which is running physical stores. Blockbuster promotes the online service to their 50 million existing customers. It's the perfect partnership. On paper, Blockbuster gets a complete digital presence without having to build it from scratch. Netflix gets the capital they desperately need to survive, plus the brand power of the most recognized name in video rentals. But here's what actually happened inside that boardroom, according to interviews that came out years later. John Antioco and his executive team don't take the Netflix founders seriously at all. Netflix is actively losing money every single quarter. They only have about 300,000 subscribers at this point. Meanwhile, Blockbuster has 50 million customers walking through their doors every single week. From Antiocho's perspective, the math doesn't make any sense. Why would Blockbuster pay $50 million for a company that isn't even profitable yet? Why would they invest in online rentals when people clearly love the experience of going to a physical store? The browsing, the impulse rentals, the popcorn and candy at the checkout counter? That's the real business. Online seemed like a novelty that would never replace the in-store experience. Barry McCarthy, who was Netflix's chief financial officer at the time, said this in a later interview. They just about laughed us out of their office. The Blockbuster executives simply couldn't imagine a world where people wouldn't want to drive to a physical store on a Friday night. That assumption would cost them everything. But here's the brutal irony that makes this story even more painful. Inside Blockbuster's own company, there were actually people who saw the future coming. In 2004, Blockbuster finally launched their own online rental service to compete directly with Netflix. And you know what? It actually worked pretty well. By 2006, they had built up 2 million online subscribers. That's real growth. The people running that digital division understood exactly what was happening in the market. They watched Netflix growing at 50%. Year over year, they saw the shift coming like a tidal wave on the horizon. They tried to sound the alarm bells. But this is where internal company politics completely destroyed everything. Blockbuster's physical stores were still incredibly profitable. The franchise owners, the thousands of people who actually ran those 9,000 locations, saw online rentals as a direct threat to their personal businesses. Every Netflix-style rental that happened online was one rental that didn't happen inside their store. Their commission disappeared, so the franchise owners pushed back, hard. When Blockbuster offered online customers the ability to return DVDs directly at any physical store location and immediately pick up a new movie without waiting for the mail, it was actually brilliant. That was the one major advantage they had over Netflix. No waiting for the postal service. Instant gratification. But the franchise owners absolutely hated this program. They were essentially subsidizing the online business with their own inventory. They weren't getting paid for those instant exchanges, so they complained to corporate headquarters constantly. Then, in 2007, something happened that sealed Blockbuster's fate. Activist investor Carl Icahn forced John Antiocho out of the company and brought in a new CEO named Jim Keyes. Keyes had previously worked at 7-Eleven convenience stores. He didn't have any background in the entertainment or technology industries. His very first major decision as CEO was to scale back the online rental business dramatically and refocus all the company's energy on physical stores. The people inside Blockbuster who actually understood digital technology and where the market was heading got sidelined. They got ignored in meetings. Many of them eventually left the company in frustration. Jim Keyes famously said this to a reporter in 2008. Neither Redbox nor Netflix are even on the radar screen in terms of competition. We don't even consider them relevant to our business. This was 2008. Netflix already had 8.4 million subscribers at that point. What happened next became a textbook example of how not to adapt to changing markets. In 2010, Blockbuster filed for bankruptcy protection. They had accumulated $900 million in debt. The stores started closing by the hundreds every single month. Netflix just kept growing and growing. But here's what makes this story even more painful to watch in hindsight. By 2010, Netflix had already moved beyond DVD rentals entirely. They launched their streaming service and started building the future of television right in front of everyone's eyes. Blockbuster was still trying to optimize their DVD rental business and improve their store layouts, while Netflix was building something completely different. In 2013, Netflix released a show called House of Cards. It was original content that they produced themselves. They weren't just a rental company anymore. They had become a major television studio creating award-winning programming. Today, there's exactly one Blockbuster store left in the entire world. It's located in Bend, Oregon. People visit it like it's a museum exhibit. They take selfies in front of the old VHS displays. It exists purely as a nostalgia tourist attraction. Netflix is currently worth over $150 billion. So what can anyone learn from watching Blockbuster's empire completely collapse? First, your biggest revenue stream can actually become your biggest liability over time. Late fees funded the entire company and kept it profitable for years. But those same late fees also created the customer resentment that made people eager to switch to any alternative the moment one appeared. Netflix understood this psychology and built their entire business model around eliminating that exact pain point. Second, listening to the loudest voices in your organization instead of the smartest voices will eventually kill you. The franchise owners were loud and politically powerful. They could organize and complain effectively to corporate headquarters. But the digital team was right about where the future was heading. Blockbuster's leadership chose to listen to the people protecting the past instead of the people trying to build the future. And third, arrogance is incredibly expensive in the business world. When you're the king of an industry, it becomes dangerously easy to dismiss smaller challengers. You assume your dominance will continue forever because it always has. You simply can't imagine losing your position at the top. Blockbuster executives literally laughed at Netflix because they couldn't conceive of a world where their business model would become obsolete. Think about all the advantages Blockbuster had in that critical moment. They had complete brand recognition across the entire country. They had massive amounts of capital to invest in new technology. They had 9,000 physical locations that could have become pickup points for an integrated online and offline service. They had the loyalty of 50 million existing customers who trusted the brand. They even had the golden opportunity to buy Netflix outright for just $50 million when it was struggling to survive. But they couldn't imagine a world where people stopped driving to a video store on Friday nights. That single failure of imagination, that inability to see beyond their current success, cost them absolutely everything they had built. The question isn't really what happened to Blockbuster anymore. Everyone knows how that story ended with bankruptcy and closure. The real question is whether we're actually paying attention to these lessons in our own lives and businesses. Because right now, somewhere in the world, there's probably a company that's too successful to imagine failing, too comfortable to recognize the threats on the horizon, and too arrogant to take seriously the small competitor that's about to change everything. For more real stories about legendary companies and the decisions that destroyed them, subscribe to the channel.